Okay, we're starting the second part of Unit 7 today, Section 10.3, Solving Quadratic Functions. And I'm going to skip on down here to Solving Quadratics. What we need to remember is that solutions, our first fill in the blank, solutions of a quadratic are the x-intercepts. Remember, x-intercepts are where the graph crosses the x-axis. These are also called roots or zeros. So your solution or your answer is when you solve for x, and those are the x-intercepts. That's where it crosses the x-axis. You can either have 0, 1, or 2 real solutions. I'm going to show you how those different possibilities can exist. There are two main ways to find solutions. The first is to graph the function to locate the x-intercepts. And then wherever the x-intercepts are, those are solutions. And then the other is to solve the equation algebraically. Those are the two ways that we can do it. Now, in order to solve by graphing, in this one, where the vertex is actually on the x-axis, there's only one point here on or that crosses or touches the x-axis. And so that means we have one real solution. And my x value at that solution is 0. That's where it hits the x-axis. On part B, where we have x squared minus 4 graphed, we have where it crosses the x-axis in two places. This first point is where x hits at -2, -1, -2 on the x-axis. That's one solution. The other solution is over here where it crosses the x-axis on the positive side, and that's x is positive 2. So in this one you can see we have two real solutions. And then finally the last one is where my x-intercepts down here, I have no x-intercepts, okay, because it doesn't touch or cross the x-axis. And when that happens, you have no real solution. That's your answer. And those are the only three possibilities that exist. It's either going to touch it in one place, cross it in two places, or it's not going to touch or cross it at all. Now we are going to solve each of these equations by sketching the graph of the related function, and we're going to look at the graph to determine what our solutions are. Okay, we've got y equals 2x squared. This is in standard form. And remember, when we have standard form, my x is the opposite of b. I'm doing this color here. X is the opposite of b over 2a. Since I don't have a b term, I don't have an x term, that means my b is 0 and my a is 2. Well, 0 divided by anything is 0. So the x of my vertex is 0. And then to get the y of my vertex, I'm going to plug 0 into my equation. So I'm going to have 2 times 0 squared. 0 squared is 0 times 2 is 0. So my y value of my vertex is 0. So my vertex is going to be right here on 0, 0. I'm going to do a little table over here so that I have other points to graph of my parabola, of my quadratic function. I know that 0, 0 is my vertex. That goes in the middle. I need 2 points to the left and 2 points to the right. The 2 points to the left, I'm going to have -1 and -2, and to the right I'll have +1 and +2. And we're going to plug these into this equation. Well, -2 squared is a +4, because of order of operations we're going to square before we multiply. And here we go, I'll plug this in. Y equals 2 times -2 squared. The -2 squared is 4. So that one would be 2 times 4, which is 8. And on -1, y equals 2 times -1 squared. I'll square that first. -1 squared is a +1. And 2 times 1 is 2. And of course, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say that this is being graphed by 2's so I can fit it on here. So 0, 0, I'll go -1 and up 2. And it's going to mirror on the other side +1 and up 2. And then over 2 and up 8. And then it's going to mirror on the other side over 2 and up 8. And so this is going to be a graph of my parabola. And because we're going by twos, this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. And the only place where it touches or crosses the x-axis is actually on the vertex on the origin. So I have one real solution. It's that x equals 0. That's going to be my answer, because that's where it crosses. It touches the x-axis at a value of 0. Okay, I'm going to try the next one. Again, this is in standard form, so I need to find the x of my vertex. X is going to be the opposite of b over 2a. And we have the same issue here where we don't have a b term, there's no x term. So that means that our b is 0, and 0 divided by anything is 0. So my x value of my vertex again is 0. To find the y, I'm going to plug that back into the original equation. So I have 2 times 0 squared plus 2. 0 squared is 0, times 2 is 0, plus 2 is 2. So my vertex is left and right 0 and up 2. This one's also going to go by 2's on my graph so I can get it all to fit in. I'm going to do a table here. The middle of my table is going to be my vertex. And I need 2 points on each side, -1 and -2, and +1 and +2. If I plug in, and this time I'm going to plug in the positive numbers. It really doesn't matter. Do whatever looks easiest to you. Over here I plugged in the -1 and the -2. This time I'm going to plug in the +1 and the +2, and then just mirror on the other side. So for +1, I have 2 times 1 squared plus 2. 1 squared is 1, times 2 is 2, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So I go over 1 and up 4, and that's going to mirror on both sides. To get that second point on either side, I'm going to plug in a +2. Y equals 2 times 2 squared plus 2. 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8, and 8 plus 2 is 10. So that's going to be over 2 and up 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Because remember, we changed our scale to go by 2's. And this parabola is going to go up like that. And you'll notice that it does not touch the x-axis at all. So this is no real solution because it doesn't ever cross or touch the x-axis. And finally, we're going to do the last one. This is going to be 2x squared minus 2. The x value of my vertex is opposite of b over 2a. We have the same thing here where I don't have a b term, so my b is 0, and 0 divided by anything is 0. When I plug that in for y, 0 squared is 0 times 2 is 0 minus 2. That's going to give me a -2. So if my vertex is 0, -2, and we're going to do this one by 2's too so that we can compare pretty easily. 0, -2 is down here, and that's my middle number. I'm going to do 2 points to the left and 2 points to the right. When I plug in a +1, I have 2 times 1 squared minus 2. And remember, we square before we multiply. 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2, minus 2 is 0. And then it's going to be mirrored on the other side. And then when I plug in a +2, 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. And 8 minus 2 is 6. So I have over 1 and up and down 0, and over to the left 1 and up and down 0, and then I have over 2 and up 2, 4, 6, and that's mirrored over here. And this is going to be my parabola of this third equation. This time, though, it crosses the x-axis in 2 places. This is at -1, so my solution here is x equals -1. Here I'm at +1, so x equals +1, and I have 2 real solutions, both positive and -1. So that's the first way that we can find the solution to the function, is to graph it and see where it touches or crosses the x-axis, and those points on the x-axis are going to be our solutions. We can also do it algebraically. And the big key here is to remember that what we're trying to do is to get x by itself. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I get x squared equals 128 divided by 2 is 64. Once you get the x squared by itself, to undo the square, I take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 64 is both positive and negative 8. So what we say is that x equals positive 8 or x could equal negative 8. And the reason it's positive or negative 8, if you think about it, 8 times 8 is 64, but negative 8 times negative 8 is also 64. So when you take the square root, the solution could be either positive or negative. And so that one has 2 real solutions. Okay, over here, my goal is to get the variable by itself, so I'm going to add 25 to the other side to get the t by itself, t squared by itself. And I get t squared equals 25. To undo the square, we take the square root of both sides. So I have t equals, and then because I'm taking the square root of 25, it could either be positive 5 or t could equal negative 5. And those are both solutions to the problem. So there's 2 solutions there. And number 3. Again, we're trying to get the variable by itself, so to undo the addition, I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. And I get 3n squared equals 0. To get the n by itself, we divide both sides by 3. And I get n squared equals 0. To undo the square, I'm going to take a square root. The square root of 0 is 0, and it's neither positive or negative, so that's just one answer. It's just going to be n equals 0. Okay, next problem, I'm going to subtract 32 from both sides because I'm trying to get to the x squared and get it by itself. That gives me 2x squared equals negative 32. Trying to get to the x squared, so I'm going to undo this multiplication by dividing by 2. So that gives me x squared equals negative 16. Now what I would try to do typically is we would take the square root of x squared and take the square root of both sides. But we have a problem here. You can't square root a negative number. Not yet anyway. You can't take the square root of a negative number. Therefore, it's no real solution, or NRS. Okay, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. We'll talk about that in Algebra 2, but for our purposes, if you take the square root of a negative number, it's no real solution. Okay, let's try the next step, number 5. So what you can see here is I got 2 solutions here, I got 2 solutions here. I had 1 solution here and no real solution on number 14. So we're just giving you an example of just about everything. On this one I add 8 to both sides. So I have 2m squared, 82 and 8 is 90. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Let's do this. It's easier to see. And I get m squared equals 45. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And when you put 45 in your calculator, you're going to get an answer. And I'm going to have you round it to 1 decimal place for right now. Your calculator is going to say is 6.7, the positive one. But we know when we take the square root of the number, our solution could be either positive or negative. So both of those are solutions. If you only have one of them, it's not going to be completely correct. Okay, number 6, I'm trying to get the x squared by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this fraction, I'm going to multiply this entire equation by my lowest common denominator, which is 3. So I'm going to multiply this side times 3, and I'll multiply this side times 3. When I multiply this side times 3, the 3's cancel, and I have x squared. 32 times 3 is 96 over 1, which is 96. Now I can take the square root of x squared, and I get In the calculator, I put the square root of 96, I get 9.8. And remember, it also could be a negative 9.8. And check with your teacher and see if your teacher wants you to simplify instead of finding decimals. So for instance, in 45, if I was going to simplify that, that's the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. You look for a perfect square that goes into that. Square root of 9 is 3. So this would be plus or minus 3 square roots of 5. The 5 I can't take a square root of. And 3 square roots of 5 and 6.7 are the same thing. So ask your teacher whether they want you to simplify the radical or just go ahead and take a decimal. Okay, that's going to be a teacher decision. All right, I'm adding 121 to both sides to get the y squared by itself. That gives me y squared equals 121. I'm going to take the square root of both sides to get the y by itself. Square root of 121 is 11, and so you're going to have both the positive and the negative of 11. Okay, we've got a negative working in here, so let's see how that works out. When I subtract 15 from both sides, 5 and negative 15 is negative 10. Then over here I have negative 5x squared. To get the x squared by itself, I'm dividing both sides by a negative 5. And I have x squared equals negative 10 divided by negative 5 is a positive 2. You're going to take the square root of both sides. And so I have x equals plus or minus 1.4. And my students can write it as plus or minus. What that means is that x equals both positive 1.4 and x equals negative 1.4. Check with your teacher to see if they want you to write out the two separate solutions or if they'll take this. And then remember also, if they're having you simplify, this answer would be just x is plus or minus the square root of 2, because you can't simplify the square root of 2. So there's different ways it can be shown. You just need to make sure you know what your teacher's preference is. Okay, for this one I'm subtracting 98 from both sides. So I have 2x squared equals negative 98. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So I have x squared equals negative 49. And then you want to take the square root of both sides. But the problem is, I can't take the square root of a negative number. So remember, if you can't take the square root of a negative number, your answer is no real solution, or NRS. And that concludes our solving quadratic functions for today.